Hi everyone and welcome once again to the TrainAid HQ. My name is Nick and in today's video we are going to be looking at the Level 3 Award in Education and Training, and we are going to be investigating Unit C, which is Understanding Assessment in Education and Training. So the purpose of this video is to give you a walkthrough guide into this unit. Okay, we're going to be breaking down our assignment questions, and we're going to give you lots of help and advice on how to answer those questions. Once again, do like the video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive the latest updates and alerts from the team. So let's get started. Let's get straight into Unit C. And we're going to be looking at the different types of assessment methods and how to conduct assessments within teaching, within education and training. This assignment is typically the suggested word count is between 2,000 to 3,000 words. However, you can write as much detail as you wish. You only need to use the Angravels, the Award in Education and Training textbook. You can, of course, use other sources of information, such as other textbooks, websites within your teaching area. That's absolutely fine to use. But once again, you only need to use the Angravels textbook as well. So first of all, start off by putting your name just on the assignment template. I will just do the same. Okay, and we are going to just investigate each assignment question just at a comfortable pace as well. So I'm going to make reference to the textbook throughout. So first of all, we have criteria 1.1. Explain the purposes of different types of assessment used in education and training. Okay, so this assignment question, we are going to be looking at the big three different types of assessment within education and training. We have initial, we have formative, and also summative as well. Now, to answer this assignment question, I would recommend having a look at pages 152 to 153. Okay. So we are going to be looking at the big three types of assessment used within teaching, training, and also assessment as well. So do have a look at pages 152 to 153. Okay. So we have to define the purpose of each one: initial, formative, and summative as well. So how is each assessment method used within education and training? So initial assessment, that happens at the beginning, okay? It happens at the beginning of a course, a qualification. This happens at the very beginning of a lesson, an everyday lesson. And the purpose of this is to find out very much a benchmark of where learners are at in terms of their course, their qualification, and their knowledge. Okay, so it gives you, the teacher or trainer, an excellent insight into where they are at, their starting point, what's their current knowledge of their course or qualification. So a typical initial assessment could be an application form. It could be an informal icebreaker at the start of a course. It could be a formal interview as well. So initial assessment happens at the beginning of the qualification or course. And what we would like for you to do here is to describe and to go into detail just about what is the purpose of initial assessment. Okay, so initial assessment, it helps to create that bond with that learner so you can see what their current knowledge is, and you can outline their strengths and also areas for development as well. So furthermore, you can find out whether or not there needs to be any support that you can provide to the learner during the course or qualification. And just remember, if you as a teacher or trainer can't provide that initial support, then of course you can hopefully signpost the learner to perhaps some support networks, or you could arrange some support as well. So for example, you could organize some one-to-one support with perhaps a teaching assistant, and that could be organized by you. You could have a teaching assistant within your lesson as well. So through initial assessments, we can find out the learners, perhaps learning style, their motivations for doing the course, the qualification, their current strengths, their hobbies and interests maybe as well. But all of that information can be found during the initial assessment stage. And of course, you will have different initial assessments depending on the qualification or course that you are delivering as well. But we'll come on to more of the different types of initial assessment shortly. But for this assignment question, we would like for you perhaps to explain the purpose of initial assessment here. And once again, do have a look at page 153. And we're looking for perhaps a paragraph of information on the purpose of initial assessment there. Now, as we can tell, formative assessment is very much the middle of our teaching program. So formative is otherwise known as the on-course assessment. So this is very much checking your learner's progress. So it's very much the on-course assessment. So I always like to think of formative assessments being in the here and now. So asking learners perhaps nominated questions, open questions, you're checking their progress in class. Okay, so this is otherwise known as the on-course assessment. Okay, and it gives you an idea to say, you know, are learners on track? Okay, if we didn't have formative assessments, then we would have no idea about whether our learners are on the right track. Okay, if not, they could perhaps go off piste, and that's the purpose of formative assessment. We are checking and rechecking, are they on the right track? Okay, so by doing activities such as paired work, group work, sort of informal checking, then we can see that they are progressing well with their course or qualification. The final assessment we have is summative assessment. So that is an assessment that takes place typically at the end of a course or qualification. So summative assessment is your typical exams. This could be a final observation. This is where learners put all of their knowledge into practice. Okay, so think of perhaps a traditional exam. I remember those within perhaps a sports hall at the end of an academic year. And this is very much a measure of achievements. So just within the textbook, I've got this on page 154. Summative assessments usually occur at the end of a session, a program, a topic or unit, or full qualification. They are a measure of achievement towards set requirements or criteria rather than focusing on progress. This type of assessment can often be quite stressful to learners and sometimes leads to a failed result, even though the learner is quite capable under other circumstances. And therefore, obviously, we need to prepare our learners for a summative assessment as well. Okay, perhaps doing mock assessments can help our learners in order to achieve hopefully a pass at their summative assessment stage as well. So for this assessment criteria, once again, we are looking for you to describe what is the purpose of initial assessment or diagnostic assessment, what is the purpose of formative assessment, and finally, what is the purpose of summative assessment as well. So we're looking for a paragraph on each. We've got the suggested word count there of 200 to 300 words, but You may find yourself writing more than that. That's absolutely fine as well. Just on page 2 here, you can, of course, write your answer here, or just going back, you could write your assignment questions underneath those bullet points. That is absolutely fine as well. So there is a couple of options there. So 1.1 is very much looking at the purpose of those different types of assessment methods. 1.2 is to describe the characteristics of different methods of assessment in education and training. So we've identified the purpose of initial, formative, and summative, but for now, what we are moving on to is describing the characteristics of initial, formative, and summative. Okay. And what we are just moving on to is we are describing the different methods. So we're describing what is initial. Okay. So for example, we have icebreakers, application forms, interviews, for example. And my advice is do have a look at pages 55 to 56 within the textbook. Okay. So we've got some good examples of initial and also diagnostic assessments in there. We also have formative assessments as well. So we understand the purpose. We just need to describe 2 or 3 examples here of formative assessment. So these could include verbal questions, whether that's nominated or open questions. This could be quizzes that you give to your learners. Okay, so any type of quiz within a lesson, whether that's paper-based or perhaps an online quiz using platforms such as Socrative or Kahoots nowadays. Those are classic examples of formative assessments. I know that by using Socrative, it could be using mobile phones. Okay, that is going to be quite an enjoyable way of checking that learning has taken place. Also homework as well. So giving your learners perhaps homework tasks. Those are typical formative assessment methods there. Once again, have a look at pages 153 to 154 within the textbook, and that's going to provide you with some classic examples of formative assessment methods. Okay, so do have a look at those pages there. Okay, and for this assignment question, we're just looking for you to describe perhaps 2 or 3 different types of formative assessment methods. So in the previous question, we looked at the purpose, but now we're really pinpointing and would like for you to describe perhaps 2 or 3 different formative assessment methods. Do feel free to include your own examples if you teach already. Perhaps describe what formative assessment methods that you use. You can, of course, include any photos or images as well. The final one is summative assessment method. So we are describing here different types of summative assessment methods. So these are the classic final assessments. So for example, assignments. So that is handing in perhaps a portfolio of assignments at the end of a course or qualification. Typical examinations as well. So this could be an open book or a closed book examination, which happens at the end of a course or qualification. Presentations as well. So definitely vocational based assessments, vocational based qualifications might have a presentation that learners do at the end of a course or qualification, typically within the world of business, for example. There could be observations as well. So at the end of the course, it might be a requirement for learners to perhaps conduct a skill, and you as a teacher or trainer or assessor are going to be observing them. Okay, so typically here at TrainAid, we deliver a lot of first aid qualifications, and we use observations to obviously observe learners to see what they've learned in terms of their first aid skills. Okay, but really to summarize, what we're asking you in order to complete criteria 1.2, we would like for you to describe different examples of initial, formative, and also summative assessment method. So perhaps pick out perhaps 2 or 3 per each assessment method: initial, formative, and summative. So we're moving from the purpose just onto the different types and the characteristics there. Okay. Once again, the suggested word count is 200 to 300 words, but you can, of course, write as much as you wish, and you might, of course, find yourself going over that criteria as well. Once again, you can, of course, use the bullet points as a guide, or you can write your assignment answers just on this page here as well. So, of course, with your assignment template, it might, of course, need a little bit of editing, deciding on whether you use the bullet points or write your answer here below. Okay, but once again, do feel free to use any images or screenshots of any previous assessment methods you have used within your current teaching. Okay, so we're moving on to criteria 1.3. Okay, 1.3 is to compare the strengths and limitations of assessment methods in relation to meeting individual learner needs. Okay, now what I'd like for you to do is to review textbook pages 158 to 169. Okay, and you'll see quite a large table of different assessment methods. Okay, and there are a range of different assessment methods that you will see here. Okay, and we just looking at the different methods, we have assignments, we have buzz groups, case studies, we have checklists, controlled assessments, discussions. There's also debates, essays, examinations, group work. There's a range of different types of assessment methods. Some of those that you will use within your current and future teaching, some of them you might not experience within your teaching, and that is okay. Now, what we would like for you to do is, using this grid, this table, we would like for you to select a minimum of 3 different types of assessment methods. Okay. And we would like for you to pick out the 3 that you are using. Okay. So any 3 from our list within the textbook. We would like for you to state the assessment method. We would like for you to describe the method there. So perhaps a paragraph of information on the methods. Okay, so do go into detail, describe the assessment method. Okay, so perhaps what is the purpose, once again, of assignments? What is the purpose of debates? When are they used? And also, I'd like for you to really go into detail and to go into detail and find out the strengths and also the limitations or considerations when using those assessment methods. Okay, now you can pick out 3 assessment methods. They could be assignments, they could be examinations, they could be debates. Any 3 from the list is absolutely fine, but we're looking for you to describe. We're looking for you to pick out a minimum, I'd say, of 2 strengths and 2 limitations as well. So just avoid bullet points here, because we do like for you to explain, okay, the strengths and also the limitations of those assessment methods. But the 3 assessment methods are very much down to you to decide. Okay, you could choose a blend of informal and also formal assessments. You could choose 3 formal assessment methods. Those could be examinations, they could be presentations, and also a portfolio of assignments as well. Okay, so any 3 is down to you. Okay, once again, do feel free to edit the grid as well, this table. It is completely up to you. It's your style of your assignments as well. So do have a look at those within your assignment. The suggested word count for this criteria is a little bit more. We would say 500 words, but of course you may go over that suggested word count, and that's absolutely fine if you do go over. Okay, bearing in mind there's no official word count here. Okay, so I'd recommend that you do stick to the grid in order to complete that criteria. Okay, we're making excellent progress, by the way. We are going to look now at criteria 1.4, explain how different assessment methods can be adapted to meet individual learner learning needs. So as a teacher, a trainer, and also as an assessor, you have the power, you have the ability to adapt your assessments in order to promote fairness and equality. And you have the power to really to adapt your assessments to meet the individual's learner needs. And I always think that having a strong initial assessment, such as an application form, an interview, you can find out your learner's strengths and to see whether or not they need any type of support on your course or qualification. And you can obviously make adaptations to your assessments as well. So I always think one bit of advice is always find out about the learner and think about how are they going to perform within the assessment on your course, whether they need any support provided by yourself or by a specialist such as a teaching assistant or a reader or a scribe as well. So let's get into this assignment question then. So explain a minimum of three ways assessments can be adapted within teaching and training. So just in our brackets here, we have some examples which you can use in order to break down criteria 1.4. So being an assessor myself, I have used these different methods in order to make assessments more accessible to learners. So the first one is extra time. Okay, so 25%. So by working with awarding bodies, okay, such as Highfield, for example, if learners do require that extra time, okay, it's usually 25%. Okay, perhaps they just need a little bit more time to read questions, to process their thoughts and to write down their answers. Okay, and 25% absolutely fine. So do feel free to give learners that time. I always think if you're going to be changing assessment methods, it's always important to speak to your manager, the IV, and also the awarding body as well. So do notify them that you are going to make that change and the reasons for that as well. So once again, just going back to that initial assessment, if you have perhaps an icebreaker, an application form or an interview, you can understand just from that initial assessment why the learner perhaps needs a bit of extra time as well, but that's fine to do so. Another way that we can change and adapt an assessment method is by organizing a reader or scribe as well. So within the world of teaching and assessing, you have a variety of different learners on your course or qualification, and they might need some additional support. They might need a reader. This is someone to sit with them and perhaps read the assessment paperwork or instructions, and you could perhaps have a staff member who's available to be a reader, okay, to sit with them, and that is going to be fantastic for them. That is going to allow for them to understand what is the question all about, what is the question essentially. So you could organize perhaps a fellow staff member if they're available to be a reader. Furthermore, if not available, perhaps you could arrange for a teaching assistant to be perhaps a reader and also a scribe as well. So obviously that that is the person who's going to be writing down the answers. So if the learner can't physically write down the answers, okay, the reader is going to read the question. They're going to listen to the learner and write down the learner's response as well. So if they can't do that, that's absolutely fine. One of the most common ways that we can change and adapt the assessments is by arranging perhaps a private room for the learner. So one of my previous experiences when I was going through my GCSE years, I remember having I had to do an exam. Typically within a sports hall, there'd be 100 students. Okay, so it's quite a daunting experience, of course. But if learners do experience perhaps exam stress by being in such a large exam room, such as a sports hall, you can, of course, arrange for a private room. So for learners to take an exam, perhaps in their own room with an invigilator, of course. And that way, that is going to help to allow for the learner who's taking the exam to focus on their exam fully. So hopefully through an initial assessment, we can find out if a learner does suffer from exam stress, and we can hopefully arrange for a private room, and if it's a practical assessment, the assessment area could be perhaps at a quiet time where they're it's not very busy, so it allows for them to focus on their task at hand as well. We could adapt assessment resources, so we can make resources more accessible to learners. This could be perhaps adapting a classroom. It could be changing of resources to make it more accessible, perhaps changing the font size as well. So it could be issuing assessment resources for dyslexic learners, perhaps printing exam papers within a different color, such as yellow. So it makes it more accessible, more readable for learners as well. So I think printing within a larger font size is a good hallmark of assessor. So that's going to make instructions more readable to learners as well. Also, we could arrange for a translator as well. So if a learner is present and they might need a translator, someone to support them, perhaps translating the assignment questions, then we of course will need a specialist here. But we can of course arrange for a translator to be present, and that's going to support them with their questions as well. So those are just some typical ways in which you as a teacher or trainer can adapt assessment methods there. So perhaps start by analyzing this question by simply picking out any three and just talking about how assessments can be adapted there. Once again, do feel free to use your own experience, okay, if you've taught already, okay, so what changes have you made within your own teaching and assessment practice? The two further bullet points, once again, is why is it important to adapt assessments for learners? Okay, so these are just some reasons why it's so important. Of course, we are here to promote equality and fairness. The Equality Act of 2010 states that we as teachers and trainers are there to support our learners. And once again, I would recommend by talking about the reputation of yourself as a trainer and the organization as well. So it's very much down to you to very much put your first step forward to support the needs of the learner on behalf of the organization, and also the needs of the awarding body as well. So the reputation, the needs of the awarding body, to make sure that you're fair with your learners as well. I would also recommend that if you ever get stuck with adapting assessment methods, that you approach perhaps your manager and also the IV as well, the IV and also the EV of your awarding body as well. But just finally, just to cap off this assignment question, do include any experiences of adapting assessments within your teaching role. This is, of course, optional. If you're new to teaching, you might never have obviously made any adaptations to assessment methods. So the suggested word count here is, I'd say, between 200 to 300 words. The main area of this assignment you can tackle is picking out 3 different ways that you as a teacher or trainer can adapt assessments to meet the needs of your learners. Okay, do feel free once again to use those bullet points to write underneath, or you can use the blank page here to write your assignment answer as well. Okay, so we are very much progressing very well throughout this unit C, all to do with assessment and assessment methods. Now we're moving on to criteria 2.1. Explain why it is important to involve learners and others in the assessment process. Okay, now to break down this assignment question, we are going to be looking at 3 reasons why it is important to involve both the learners, okay, and others within the assessment process. Okay, now there's a reason we do this. Okay, why it's important to involve the learner and others within the assessment process, and do have a look on pages 170 to 171 within the textbook. First of all is clarity of information to learners. So even before a course or qualification starts, it's very important that we advertise, that we promote the assessment methods used, perhaps on our course website, that we're emailing our learners all of this information about how the course is going to be assessed, what's involved prior to the course beginning. So it's very important that we do promote clarity. Okay, if learners are fully clear about the course or qualification, how it's assessed, this is going to make your course or qualification a lot smoother. So trust me, from a college background, we used to have enrollment every September. Students would go through an interview process, and we would tell them about the course duration, the guided learning hours, and what's involved, when their examinations are going to be as well. So that is going to help promote clarity. Okay, so it's very important that we do give learners as much information as possible here. And of course, it does promote fairness as well for the learner. So as long as we're communicating what's expected, then that is going to be promoting fairness. And there's no reason why you as a teacher or trainer can't say, at this moment in time, I don't think that this course is right for you. Please seek perhaps another course pathway, perhaps the lower level of the course, to get them up to standards, so they are perhaps ready for them to take your course as well. So it does promote fairness. So we don't want to put learners onto a course or qualification where further down the line that they are finding it very hard and stressful and difficult. They could leave your course, okay, and that could affect your course rates, your success rates. But furthermore, we want to do what's right for our learners, and what we want to give them the best and honest advice as well. So that's why it's so important that we do involve our learners from the start and do give them the best and honest advice. Another point I put down is reliability and standardization as well. So it's not just the learner that we are involving, but of course we are involving other teachers as well. So we are involving our head of departments. We are involving fellow teachers who teach perhaps on the same course and our qualification as well. And so we are going to perhaps hold standardization meetings, and therefore you are perhaps going to share your course learner progress, for example. So it's very good to share where your learners are at on your course or qualification. So through standardization, through meetings, we can inform our teachers and head of departments how our learners are progressing, what's going well, and any areas for development for our learners. So it's all to do with sharing good practice. If we go through the assessment process on our own, we're not promoting standardization. So it's always good to work with your fellow teachers, your fellow trainers, okay? And that's going to make the assessment process clearer, okay? And that is all to do with sharing good practice. Have a look at textbook pages 171 as well. So you will see a grid, okay, of the different people that you will need to liaise with. So teaching should never be alone. You might, of course, have to inform administrators, assessors, colleagues, exam officers of the assessment process. So there's a need to obviously communicate your assessments with them. You might need to arrange for exam invigilators. You might need to print your examination paperwork as well. So it's very much important to inform support staff of when they might be needed, okay, to be a reader and perhaps to be a scribe as well. And it's very much important to let learners and, of course, fellow teachers know well in advance when an assessment is going to be taking place. So you can, of course, book out rooms, facilities, and also equipment as well. As a former teacher within a college, I would have to let my fellow colleagues know when my learners were going to be ready for examination. Okay, I would have to book out a sports hall and also print my exam papers once again and notify my EV when I would be finishing the course and when exam papers are going to be ready for submission and for exam paperwork to be sampled as well. But my advice is to be clear with your fellow colleagues when assessments are going to be taking place. But once again, to answer this assignment question, please pick out a minimum of 3 reasons why it's important to involve the learner and others within the assessment process. So do have a look at those pages and also the grid on page 171, and that's going to give you some good guidance and clues on why it's important to involve others and, of course, who to involve as well. Once again, the suggested word count is between 200 to 300 words, and you can, of course, write as much as you wish there. So you can use those bullet points or write your answers just on the next page, just on that blank page there as well. Okay, wow, we're making excellent progress on this assignment talk through. So now we're moving on to criteria 2.2. This is to explain the role and use of peer and self-assessment in the assessment process. Okay, now we are going to be looking at peer and also self-assessment here. So we have to explain what peer and self-assessment means and also the advantages and limitations of each one. So let's start off with the term peer assessment, and please do have a look at textbook pages 172 to 174. So peer assessment, what is this all about? So peer assessment involves a learner assessing another learner's progress. Self-assessment involves a learner assessing their own progress. Both methods encourage learners to make decisions about what has been learnt so far, take responsibility for their learning, and become involved with the assessment process. Okay, so in other words, peer assessment is where you have to two learners, okay, and they are going to give each other feedback, okay. This could be perhaps swapping their work packs, their workbooks, or swapping their assignments if they're working on assignments within a class. And it's giving each other feedback as well. So this is where they are going to read their fellow peers' current work, their progress, their assignments. Okay, they're going to digest what they've written, their peers' input so far, and it's giving that honest feedback as well. So it's a great way, okay, for learners to understand how to give feedback. Okay, so they're going to give perhaps verbal feedback, or and of course written feedback as well. So they're going to be conscious, they're going to be thinking, "Oh, how am I going to give this feedback to my peer as well?" It's a great tool. I've used it within my college teaching days, and you can hear a pin drop when peer assessment is taking place because they're so invested, and they of course are going to be mindful of how they communicate and how they give feedback to their fellow peer as well. And of course, peer assessment, I always think that peers, that learners, they listen to their peers a lot closer than a teacher giving feedback as well. So I think peer assessment is incredibly valuable. Okay, and it gives you a break as well as a teacher. So of course, we are there to give feedback to each learner, but why not learners take on that role as a teacher or a tutor? And they give feedback to their tutor. They give feedback to their peers as well. So it does help communication skills. It leads to discussions which everyone can benefit from. Learners are focused upon the assessment requirements, or they can use a checklist as well. So have a look at textbook page 173, where you'll see a list of different advantages and also limitations as well. So just coming on to the limitations. Okay. I always think with peer assessments, some peers might skim read perhaps their fellow peers' work, and that just needs to be you need to be mindful of that, because they think, okay, I don't want to give any peer, negative feedback to my fellow peer as well, and that could be quite dangerous. So they might not be as honest as you want them to be. So it needs to be carefully managed as well. And of course, some peers might be quite anxious, quite nervous, or lack confidence to give feedback as well. And of course, you need to manage this time as well. So some learners might be quite quick to give feedback. Others might obviously take this time as well to really sort of to digest and give peer feedback. So it does need to be managed as well within a time limit. But I always think peer feedback is incredibly valuable as a teacher. And so to answer this question, I'd like for you to describe just to explain perhaps in 3 or 4 lines, what is the term peer feedback? If you've used this method within your own teaching so far, please do give examples. And we'd like for you to explain the advantages and limitations of peer feedback. Aim to explain 3 advantages and 3 limitations. So once again, you can use the table that is on page 173. Now, just on the flip side, we have self-assessment. Okay, so this is where learners themselves think about their current progress, their performance, and they write down their strengths and perhaps their areas for development as well. Of course, if learners have perhaps a progress log or a diary, this is a classic example of self-assessment. So they're thinking of how far I have come within my course, my progress. And I think that's a very, very valuable tool to have, is they will take ownership, okay, of their progress. We would like for them to be more reliant on themselves rather than a teacher Okay, so an advantage of self-assessment is that they will become more reliant on themselves. They become more independent and they start to think about their own selves rather than relying on a teaching figure as well. So that is a classic example of why self-assessment is so important. It encourages self-reflection. It encourages learners to check their own progress. It promotes learner involvement and personal responsibility, and learners are focused upon the assessment requirements as well. So I think that it does take a lot of self sort of progression, a lot of time to promote self-assessment. Okay, but I think it's a great way that learners become less reliant on you as a teacher or trainer. Just have a look on page 160, excuse me, 174. We will see there's a table and that shows the advantages and also limitations here. So some of the limitations then, okay, so with self-assessment, learners may feel they have achieved more than they actually have. Okay, so some learners might think, you know, through a self-assessment task, they think, yeah, I'm okay, I'm doing absolutely fine, when in fact they might have perhaps failed an assessment, and you as a teacher or trainer, you need to tell them that they failed, but that they need to drastically perhaps improve their performance or task. So that is perhaps a negative of self-assessment, is you as a teacher, you do need to step in and provide them with guidance, especially in assessment areas where safety is a big concern. And of course, some learners may lack confidence in their own ability to make decisions about their progress. So some courses do require very much a teacher input. Perhaps learners don't feel confident enough yet to sort of understand their own strengths and limitations. So perhaps self-assessment can be used when learners feel perhaps confident of their own selves to make that decision. Okay, if they're learning something new, perhaps you as a teacher need to give them lots of help and guidance. So use self-assessment when learners are a little bit more confident about what they are teaching. Okay, so to answer question 2.2, please do explain the terms peer and self-assessment. And we're looking for 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages of each one. So 3 advantages and 3 limitations of peer and self-assessment. Okay. Once again, between 200 to 300 words, but you will, of course, perhaps write more than that. And of course, on the next page, you can write your assignment question here, or you can use the bullet points if that's easier for you. Okay. Now we're staying with criteria 2.3, excuse me, and just on this assignment question, we have to identify sources of information that should be made available to learners and others involved in the assessment process. Okay, so in other words, we would like for you to explain a minimum of 5 sources of information which should be made available to learners and others before or during a course. Okay, now sources of information are there to provide learners with support in order for them to pass their course, their assessment, or their qualification. So sources of information should be available perhaps on your course or qualification website. They should be available during that initial assessment phase, so perhaps during enrollment, and they should be communicated at the start, during the assessment process. So what type of information should be provided to learners? So first of all, we have the assessment criteria. Okay, so the assessment criteria is the criteria that you as an assessor are judging the learners on. Okay, so this could be perhaps the grading criteria. Okay, it could be perhaps A star, A, B, C, and there should be a criteria on what learners need to do in order to achieve those grades. Okay, so think about it to perhaps a driving test. There would be a criteria that the examiner would have and is making a judgment on you. And perhaps you're thinking, I just want to pass my driving test. It's the same for learners on the course. They want to know the criteria. So I always think it's good to show them the criteria either before and of course during your course. And I always think mock assessments here are very good, so they can of course see what they've achieved and how it relates to the criteria as well. So perhaps show them the assessment criteria. This can be found on awarding body websites, and learners could of course download the assessment criteria. They can research it for themselves as well. Other sources of information, time and location of assessment. So that's very important to know, especially during the assessment process. So we need to let learners know the time, the location, what they need to be wearing for the assessment as well. We of course need to let them know about deadlines as well. Okay, so if your course is perhaps a year long and they have perhaps assignment and coursework deadlines, you need to let them know about perhaps an interim date and a final date. You can also provide learners with a reading list as well. So that's very important. This could be journals, textbooks, and also websites as well. So once again, you could create your own reading list, and that could be very useful for learners to perhaps read about their course, their qualification in their own time. Grade boundaries, once again, very important. Some learners want to achieve the highest grade, and that's fair enough. Other learners will perhaps settle for a pass, but some learners just want to know what criteria they need in order to pass your course or qualification, and that's fair enough. The final section, I would say, a good source of information that we need to promote to our learners is results information. So when and where learners are going to receive their results. So on a course, perhaps a first aid course, results are instant. You let learners know at the end of the course that they've passed. Other courses rather, take a little bit more time. So of course, they might receive their certificates, their results within 10 or 14 working days. Perhaps they need to go on to an exam portal in order to find out their results. But it's very important, I think, at the very beginning of a course, we do let them know all of this information. So when, where, or how they are going to receive their results as well. So I think you should mention perhaps a minimum of 5 sources of information which should be made available to learners and others at the very much the beginning or before or even during a course as well. Perhaps use these bullet points here as a guide. Once again, we're looking for between 200 to 300 words. Do include your own examples, your own experiences of teaching as well. So once again, you can use the bullet points above, or you can write your assignment answers here. That's absolutely fine. Okay, we are moving on to key features of constructive feedback. Okay, and in terms of the textbook pages, we have a good chapter on giving constructive feedback, and do have a look at textbook pages 175 to 176. And we are just investigating the different effective ways of providing feedback to learners. So I'd like for you just to explain the different key features of providing constructive feedback. And I think an excellent method that you could describe at this stage is the layer cake method. Okay, and you can, of course, just explain the key method of giving constructive feedback. I always think after a course or qualification or an assessment, I always let learners know straight away that they have either passed the assessment, or if they haven't met the criteria, it's a referral. Okay, so it's very important either way that we're letting the learners know that it's a pass or a referral, a fail, straight away, so that they know the result basically. Okay, so very well done. You have passed the assessment. These are your strengths. So these are your strengths. Perhaps pick out one or two strengths, what they have done well. Okay, then we're moving on to the middle section of the layer cake. One or two areas for development. Okay, this is what you could improve on. This is what we could do better for next time. And then the final part of the layer cake is following up with praise. So a summary overall, this is what you've done very well again. These are your overall strengths. Very well done. Okay, so we're starting with hopefully a pass. These are your initial strengths, areas for development, and furthermore, just a summary of strengths as well. It's always good to leave an assessment conversation on a positive note. Okay, so we're looking for you to describe those key features of assessments. Okay, so we're looking for, you know, the advantages and just the ways in which that you can provide effective feedback to learners. And once again, do include examples of how you as a teacher or trainer have provided feedback to your learners as well. So talk about your own experiences, your own style of providing feedback. Once again, we're looking for perhaps 200 to 300 words. I myself would tackle that assignment question by describing the layer cake method as well. Okay, but once again, do talk about your own style of providing feedback. Okay, so staying with feedback, then we're moving on to criteria 3.2. Explain how constructive feedback contributes to the assessment process. So once again, do have a look at pages 175 to 176. And we are very much just looking at the advantages of giving constructive feedback within teaching and assessing. And on page 176, we have a series of bullet points, which you can use for this assignment question as well. Okay, so just in front of me, we have a number of different advantages. So constructive feedback can create opportunities for clarification and discussion. Okay, so that can open up a two-way process between yourself as the teacher and also the learner to talk about the learner's strengths, areas for development. You can emphasize on progress rather than failure as well. So just keep an air of positivity. Okay, just really stress what the learner has done well, even if they've failed perhaps a particular element of the course. Really try to boost their morale, their confidence on saying what they can do to improve on next time. Constructive feedback can enable the learner to know what they have achieved. So constructive feedback can really help the learner to say, yes, I've done this right. I know I'm going to repeat that behavior, that action for next time. Okay. And it helps improves confidence and motivation as well. So as a teacher or trainer, as an assessor, we can be a motivator. We can provide praise. We can provide certificates, tangible rewards. We can say what they've done well. And it identifies further learning opportunities or any actions required as well. Okay, so we can, of course, provide them with necessary targets on how they could improve their teaching practice as well. So once again, to answer this question, perhaps pick out three advantages. Once again, do have a look at the bullet points on page 176, and really just expand on those 3 points of why constructive feedback is so positive and why is it so key within teaching and training. Once again, do include your own examples here, and you can of course write your assignment answer here, or do feel free to use those bullet points above. Wow, we are progressing very, very well through Unit C. Hopefully this video has been useful. Now we're moving on to very much the ways in which to give constructive feedback to learners. So we've talked about the purpose, the advantages. We're looking at the ways in which that you can give constructive feedback to learners. So explain a minimum of 3 ways how you as a teacher or trainer can provide constructive feedback to learners following an assessment. Okay, once again, do have a look at textbook pages 175 to 176. Okay, and we're just looking at the ways now. Okay, so we've just got a few examples. You can provide verbal feedback to a learner. That's one method. So providing verbal feedback to a learner, perhaps after the assessment has taken place. I always think giving immediate feedback is a good way of providing constructive feedback. I always like to give feedback privately as well, so perhaps away from the busy assessment area, out of earshot as well, so you can have a two-way conversation, but you can provide verbal feedback to learners. You can, of course, give constructive feedback through written feedback. So this could be perhaps report writing, providing learners with just a summary of what they have achieved. And that's going to confirm achievement as well. So written feedback can be handwritten. Okay, perhaps you've written feedback on a clipboard, so being there present, or it can be typed as well. It can be emailed and saved as well. But I always think it's always good to give written feedback no more than 24 hours after the assessment has taken place. Therefore, that memory of the assessment that the learner has taken part within is still fresh in their memory. Now, another way that we can give constructive feedback is through a group discussion. This can be done with fellow teachers or trainers, so you're giving perhaps group feedback, or you can do this as a class, so with peers as well. So we do this on our Level 3 award in education and training course. The teacher and also fellow peers give feedback to the learner. So a group discussion can be a good source of information. It can be a method of providing constructive feedback. And the good thing about a group discussion is different opinions can be shared. So you might not have thought about a particular strength of the learner, but another person could say, I actually saw this. This is my opinion of your strengths as well. And it's good to get sort of different opinions and thoughts there as well. But once again, my advice is to try to give constructive feedback immediately after the assessment experience as possible, so it's still fresh within the learner's memory. So I would aim to give 3 different ways of providing constructive feedback to learners there. Okay, now we are on to criteria 4.1. Explain the need to keep records of assessment of learning. Okay, now just have a look at textbook pages 13 to 14. Okay, now a great hallmark of any teacher or trainer or assessor for that matter is record keeping. So have a look at pages 13 to 14. Okay, now for any teacher or trainer, records must be maintained not only to support the teaching, learning and assessment process, but to provide an audit trail and supply information to others. Records are needed to satisfy auditors, inspectors, regulators, internal and external quality assurers, and to meet your own organization's requirements as well. So it's integral as a teacher or trainer that we do keep accurate records, that we're on top of our paperwork, that we're saving, we're scanning documents, and we're updating learners' portfolios, their tracker, and that is going to really help not only the learner, but the people that we are accountable to, such as our managers, IVs, and EVs as well. So my days working as a college teacher, I would have to constantly keep learners' records of achievement up to date. And I was always accountable to my managers, my head of departments, and they were accountable to directors of learning, for example. So there is a chain of importance, and that's why it's so important to keep records there. So we are wanting you to explain a minimum of 3 reasons why it is important to keep records of assessment as a teacher. And here we have some reasons: to track learner course progress. So learners will often ask you, Nick, where am I at in my course? How am I doing? So we can show them perhaps an assessment tracker. We can show them their marked work, and we can say, this is clear, you're working well, you're making good progress, or you're working not so well. These are your areas for development as well. So to track learner course progress and to give them feedback. Of course, we keep records to predict learner grades as well. So once again, back in my college days, I'd have to give my predicted grades to my line managers, and I would have to say to them, this is my thoughts on where my learners are at. These are their predicted grades. So I'd have to have all of that data to back up the predicted grades as well. And of course, another reason why we keep assessment records is for the IV, the EV process. We keep records typically for 3 years, and that's going to be used for evidence to provide to managers and also course leaders as well. And we obviously have to keep examples of marked learner work for standardization meetings as well. So you might be sharing different learner work, and that's going to promote standardization as well. And also we are going to keep records of assessment in case of any disputes or appeals as well. So it's always good to keep accurate data in order for perhaps an investigation into an appeal or dispute. But my advice is to try your best to be as organized as possible. I always think it's always good to have a chat to your fellow colleagues to see how they store evidence and paperwork, and you can perhaps learn from how they save work and how they use particular systems as well. Once again, I'd pick out 3 reasons why it's so important to keep records of assessment as a teacher. Perhaps use those examples there. Suggested word count between 200 to 300 words. You can, of course, write as much detail as you wish. Okay. Now on to criteria 4.2, summarize the requirements for keeping records of assessment in an organization. So the previous question was very much looking, I would say, more as the learner, okay, to keep up to date with the course progress, to predict grades for learner evidence. So that's you as a teacher point of view. Okay, it's yourself. Now we're thinking for this question as an organization. Okay, so explain a minimum of 3 reasons why it is important to keep records as an organization. So you have to play your part as a teacher here. Okay, now there are a number of reasons why it's so important that we keep assessment records as part of the organization. So obviously, as teachers and trainers, we go through the IV and external verification as well. So internal verification, that's where marking is going to be reviewed by your fellow teachers and trainers. That is part of the standardization process and practice, and also external verification as well. So that is going to be very much where a sample of your marking and work is going to be submitted perhaps every year to the exam board. We use Highfield qualifications. That's where we send off examples of marking of our marked work, marked assignments, to make sure that we are being consistent across the board in terms of our marking, our teaching methods, and feedback. So it's very important that we are marking, we're providing constructive and verbal feedback consistently across all of our assessments. The reason being that our work, our marked work, our assessment reports can be checked at random. So it's very important that we are consistent with our approach here. And once again, appeals and complaints. If a learner does want to lodge an appeal and also a complaint about the assessment methods, they can do, typically within the appeals window, typically 7 days. And of course, it's very important that we do keep our assessment paperwork to show perhaps the IV about your marking system, your style, and so that can be used as evidence if there is an appeal or a dispute. And finally, inspections as well. So it's important that you keep your assessment paperwork for any visits, perhaps from Ofsted. Okay, it could be external visits as well from awarding bodies, regulators. So they will perhaps be sampling your paperwork, your systems. And that's why it's so important that you as a teacher or trainer have got your paperwork in order, ready to show. And that is going to help satisfy the inspectors. And that's going to make it easier for them to write a report as well. So we would like for you just to pick out 3 reasons why it's so important to keep records as an organization. Perhaps explain here about the internal, external verification process to keep paperwork in order for appeals and the complaints, disputes, and also for any inspections as well. Once again, we're looking for between 200 to 300 words. You will, of course, write over that. And you can, of course, write the assignment answers below there. Wow, we've come to the end of Unit C. Once again, hopefully this video has been useful. And it's very important for you to write your learner reflection. So think about what you've learned from this unit, what you've refreshed, if you're new to teaching, how might this influence your future teaching as well. We have a reference list here with the textbook reference already written down for you. If you've used other textbooks, websites, please put those in. Remember to email your assignment to the submissions team to be marked. They take 5 working days to turn around marking. They will tell you if you passed, or they will give you hints and areas for development as well. Just remember to write your name and also put your date of submission as well. Wow, we've got through Unit C. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this has been a useful video. My name is Nick once again. Please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if there's any teaching videos you'd like for myself or one of the team to cover, please let me know and we'll certainly get that onto the YouTube channel for you. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we see you soon on one of our courses. Bye for now.